Welcome to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about homesteading stuff and life stuff and everything in between. Join me, Amy Dingman, as we explore big questions on a little farm. Welcome back to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about farmish things and not so farmish things, which is otherwise known as life. Thank you so much for joining me here at episode 251. It is October 2nd, 2023. Now, if you listened to episode 250, last episode from early August, you're expecting this episode here to be a go listen to my new project over at the Lifesteaders podcast. That's what you're expecting to hear today. A lot of things have changed. Since I recorded episode 250, a lot of things have happened in my life since I recorded episode 250, which was just a little less than a couple months ago. And I don't want this to be a 3-hour gush about all of that. So instead, we're just going to put this all together with some thoughts that I had while waiting on a pot of coffee recently. And hopefully by the end, we're all going to end up on the same page. I love me a good cup of coffee. I spent the late spring and all of summer of 2023 sucked into this ultra-busy, away-from-home life that included an almost daily frothy and sugary mocha concoction from the local Caribou Coffee as I buzzed my way through the workday. I love Caribou Coffee. But truth be told, my favorite coffee is cabin coffee, and that's the coffee we drink when we're up at the off-grid cabin way up in northern Minnesota, not far from the Canadian border. And it's a process to make a pot of cabin coffee. Pouring water from a 5-gallon jug that we bring from home because the cabin well is usually dry, and then waiting on that coffee to percolate and then settle, because you don't want to pour it right away. That all takes a lot longer than any drive-through line I've ever sat in to get a cup of coffee. And while I was waiting on this pot of cabin coffee just a couple weeks ago when we were at the cabin, I found myself thinking about simplicity and priorities and how life was very different back when a person's only option was to wait a while for a cup of coffee. In the summer of 2022, I got a part-time job working outside the home and the farm for the first time in 20 years. In late spring of 2023, so just however many months ago, I switched to full-time hours at that job. And in the beginning, I could handle the 1940s fantasy farm life that I lived, and I could handle my own writing business, and I could handle a full-time job. I could do all of that, right? Or at least I could fake it that I could. But I went into this tailspin that literally everyone else in my life could sense, but I was blind to it until September, which was last month, when I did what we're just going to call a very ugly crash and burn. So why did I switch to full-time hours in the first place? That's a great question. A therapist would probably say that I'm an overachiever who's really bad at math and doesn't see the value in any of the things that I personally create or do. And that therapist would probably be correct. A therapist would probably also say that I have some kind of guilt for not needing to live the mainstream, go, 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 work yourself to the bone for someone else, that kind of life. And therefore, in some sadistic way, I placed myself in a full-time position in this weird kind of, we're in this together, buddy, kind of thing. And I could do it. I put my head down. I was like, it's fine. I can do it all. That's the thing now, right? We can do it all, ladies. We just need better time management. We can do it all. Except doing it all really depends on what your all means. Because raising a barn full of animals for food and growing a huge garden for food doesn't mean anything if what you're actually eating is gas station pizza every night after work because there isn't time for anything else. I really do suck at math, but I have learned enough to realize that I cannot fit 45 to 50 hours a week away from home into a life that was built to honor home and family in a very specific way. And here's a plot twist that I was not expecting. I stayed home to raise and homeschool our kids, right? But what I was really doing was raising a family and building a life. And that family and that life doesn't end when the kids grow up and move on, as the mainstream would like to have us believe. What if the kids grow up and you still want to keep building that home and that life? Were we living on a farm and collecting eggs and brining our own bacon and growing cabbages and making bread and processing chickens because there were kids at home? Or were we doing all of that because that's the way we wanted to live? Now, obviously, life is different on the farm now that our kids are adults and are off doing their own thing and have their own lives. It's obviously different. But does that mean that our life was then supposed to do such a hard 180 turn that I questioned why we even had animals in the barn, and I cried when I realized it had been so long since I'd baked that my yeast and my flour had gone bad? Rosie the Riveter is fun sometimes, right? And I can absolutely do it if we are in a situation where it's necessary, and I think everybody can. I think we can all batten down the hatches and do what we need to do when we need to do it. But the last 6 months have proven to me that I have the blood of a 1940s farm wife running through my veins, sprinkled with a whole lot of, you can't tell me what to do, which some of you are going to say, you can't have those two things together. I think you can. I'm pretty sure there were some pretty feisty 1940s farm wives. But all that to say, I think the world works best when people can be exactly who they're meant to be. As far as my job goes, I kept the job for now, but I cut my hours in half because there is bread to bake at home, and there are grapes to mash. There's a garden to clean out. There are meals to make. There are people to care for, and there's a life to live. The kind of life that brings a satisfaction at the end of the day, that brings a wholeness and a feeling like I moved forward in my quest to all the things that actually matter. Or maybe I didn't move forward. Maybe I just went back to what actually matters. People that I love, things that I love, a life that I was intentional about creating. Not to mention this little thing called a Farmish Kind of Life and everything that goes with it. The learning, the fun, the community, all of that. And you know what? People have time to figure stuff like this out when they have to wait for a pot of coffee on the stove. When we are so busy and when we are moving so fast, we don't have time to think. We skip from thing to thing to thing, and we grasp and we claw at anything that seems like it might be a solution, but we feel empty, and we're dissatisfied. And that comes from spending all our energy chasing someone else's dream. That comes from looking in the wrong places for whatever it is that we seek. That comes from ignoring everything that we already have and everything that we've already built. I thought a full-time job would give me new worth and importance and peace about who I really was. It didn't give me any of that. Not at all, because I already had it in a completely different place in life. I wanted to start a new Lifesteaders website and podcast and this whole ball of wax because I thought it would be new and exciting and glittery and different from what I already had. But when I started the social medias for it, a couple different groups and a page, most people who were there still talked about homesteading or how something related to their life as a homesteader. Not everybody, but most people. Because that was the vibe of the group. And that's the vibe that I bring to everything. And that was the life all these people were living. That's the group that we all connect with each other. We attract each other, right? So why am I starting and building something new, which, by the way, is much harder to do in 2023 than it was back in 2009 when I started A Farmish Kind of Life? Why am I starting and building something new when we've already been talking about farm stuff and not farm stuff for years here at A Farmish Kind of Life? Why do I need something new? A couple months ago in episode 250, I made the analogy of wanting to move to a new house. That's how I described, A Farmish Kind of Life being the old house and Lifesteaders was going to be the new house, and I was just going to move right across the road to this new house, right? But in the last couple months of stuff happening and all these kind of signs from the universe, I've been talking to a dear friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, about this and thinking, maybe I'm not supposed to start something new. It doesn't feel right anymore. And this lovely friend of mine said, sometimes you realize you don't need to move to a new house. You just need a new coat of paint in the living room you're already in. I hope that you have a good, slow cup of coffee today, tonight, tomorrow, and take time to think about your life and what you want, where you're headed, what fits, what doesn't, what things you're taking on that are actually escapism, what things you need to give yourself some credit for, and what actually makes you happy. Enjoy your coffee. I'll talk to you again next week. Hope you enjoyed the show today. To continue the conversation, visit our website at afarmishkindoflife.com, find A Farmish Kind of Life on social media, or drop me an email at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. Peace, love, and bacon, y'all. Stay farmish.